Welcome into this latest edition of Making the Leap. We're glad to have you along, and this is our first, I guess, dignitary edition. Have we had, I don't know that we've had...
Not in studio together.
We've had elected officials before.
Right.
We've certainly never had this level of an elected official.
No.
Well, I guess technically we interviewed President Trump, and he...
Well, you did that more. I think this is maybe together, like as a couple. This
Certainly
is our
in
first.
Studio.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is really cool. Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders of Arkansas. She's the 47th governor of Arkansas, the first female governor of Arkansas.
Which is just amazing.
And one of the champions of school choice in the country. We talk a lot about her. To our south, where we sit here in Missouri, and to our north, Kim Reynolds, the governor of Iowa, are two stars.
Strong women, strong female leaders leading well. I mean, in a place where maybe at a time where sometimes female leaders are not leading as well as they could be or should be.
Or think just because you're a female that
you're guaranteed
automatically means you're a good leader. They actually put up. So we're honored to have her today. And, we are doing an evening with her at the foundation where we have several guests come in, and she'll give a long-form talk a little later. But she was nice enough to pop into our studio today and give us a bit of her time so we can ask her one-on-one about her implementation of school choice in Arkansas. Being a mom, she's a mom of 3.
Yes.
So she has these issues to think about on her own.
And I was thinking about it today when I was talking with our daughter, and I said, hey, this is what we're doing. Do you want to come? And, she does not come. She does not come to these things.
She's
but I said, we're
teenager.
speaking to the governor of Arkansas, and I think she's really neat. And she said, she? Like, she kind of stepped back like, she? I said, yes. And she's massively intelligent and very spot on, and she of course passed, but I think her interest was piqued a little bit at the option of she. So
enjoy our conversation with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, governor of Arkansas. Well, Governor, we're glad to have you here. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So we know the success you've had with school choice in Arkansas. That's the basis of our show, is to talk about school alternatives, particularly alternatives to public school. You had instant success with it. I mean, it was one of your first priorities, right? You did hard work to get there, though.
You make it sound much easier.
Right.
But really proud of what we were able to do in Arkansas. We passed Arkansas Learns during my first legislative session, and certainly one of the most transformative pieces of education legislation in our state's history, possibly anywhere in the country. And so we think it will really impact our state for years and years to come. And we decided to go with a phased-in approach to school choice, and next year it will be open wide and universal. We started our first year with the students in greatest need, students in F-rated schools there in the state, those entering kindergarten, so that as they were starting, they didn't have to change their educational journey right after they got going, and students with special needs and disabilities. Those were kind of our first year students. We're in our second year right now. In our second year, we opened up as well to families of law enforcement, first responders, and our active duty and veteran families. And so really proud of the progress that we've made and the number of families that have taken part. We have almost 17,000 students that are now going to the school of their choice, empowering parents to make decisions about how and where their kids can best be educated.
And what are you hearing from those families, from those parents, once they've taken advantage of this? That's incredible.
One of the things that is pretty amazing is, as we travel around the state now, getting to hear kids' stories of how they were once struggling and now they're in thriving environments. Right at 50% of the students that are currently enrolled in education freedom accounts in Arkansas are students with disabilities and special needs. So it is a massive change for so many of these students.
Big need there.
Exactly.
And a big undertaking.
Huge need, and certainly those students who need a different environment. Your parents, and that each one of your kids learns very differently. And as a mom of just 3 kids, I can see the difference in what each one of my kids needs. And so knowing that students now and parents can make that decision and put their kids in an environment where they have the ability to learn, because we believe that every kid can be successful if given the right tools and access and resources, and that's exactly what we're trying to do in Arkansas.
You've worked at the federal level. Do you see a role in school choice at the federal level, or is the federal level just best to get out of the way in your view?
I usually tend to think that anytime we can get the federal government out of the way, things are going to work out better. I don't think it's any secret, certainly to any of us, that local decisions and local control, particularly when it comes to education, is the best place that you can influence and impact students' long-term growth and achievement. And so the more localized we can make it, the better it's going to be. I would be a big fan of getting the federal government out of the way and letting states and individual families make the decisions about what is best for their kids and their students.
Well, and kind of piggybacking off that, we know there's no hostility towards public education in general. It's really not about that. But do you see public education always being a viable option for families, or do you feel, I know there are some in this arena that are like, get it out, we don't need it anymore? I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
You guys worked to give public school teachers a huge raise,
right?
too, by the way.
Yeah.
We did. The Arkansas Learns legislation is not only opens up for school choice, but it's also the single largest investment we've made in public education in decades in our state. Awesome. I'm a big believer that in many cases and for many families, the public school will be the best place for their child. But that's a decision that the parent should get to make.
Sure.
Whether that's at home, whether that's a public school, a private school, a charter school, that should be a decision for the parent to be empowered to ultimately decide where their kid can best learn. And so I'm a big believer and supporter of our public schools, and I think that that competition helps those schools ultimately do better as well. And so we took our teacher pay in this legislation from being at the very bottom, we were 48th in the country, to top 5 overnight.
Wow.
Because we know that having good educators in the front of the classroom makes a difference for the kids. And so as much as we can invest in our teachers, that's something we certainly want to do, and we want our public schools to be successful in the state.
It is no secret there is a lot of hostility to school choice. There's an active paid movement, really, to get states like Nebraska to roll it back. In fact, I think that's headed to the ballot in Nebraska this fall. You once told me in an interview while we were down in Little Rock that this is not something that stays forever. The voters have got to remain vigilant to codify this as an option well after Governor Sanders leaves office.
Well, and I think that the best thing that we can do to solidify and hold on to school choice is for people to experience it. And the more and more kids that we have that go to a place where they're able to thrive and do well because their parent was empowered to make that decision, I think the more advocates you're going to have for school choice. I think that so often people are afraid of what they don't know, and that is what I think you have when it comes to the debate over school choice. People think that by opening up options, you're going to shut down the local school, when to me, nothing could be further from the truth. All of these, I think, institutions matter, and having the option to decide is what really helps kind of drive that competitive spirit so that they'll continue to try to excel. So long we have allowed schools to be mediocre instead of pushing them to be at their best. We end up lowering the bar instead of raising expectations, when if we raise the expectations for students, they will meet them. Instead of trying to water things down, we should be pushing kids to their maximum, not trying to get them to reach a minimum. And so as much as we can drive that competitive I think balance between different schools and different institutions, I think that the more you're going to see people take advantage and advocate for school choice.
You know, you're a mother, you're just being a mom, being a wife. Can you speak a little bit to how that informs some of your decisions that you make as governor, especially when it comes to education, when it comes to some of this legislation? Because that has to be, I think it would be in my mind, top of mind, my own kids. I want, I'm taking care of not just your own kids, but all kids.
Your
I'm
kids are just like any other, and
Right.
they may come to need something different educationally. I assume you're open to choosing to go a different direction
Right.
with your kids too, right?
And we're having the same conversations at dinner and with our kids that every parent around our state and around the country are having. We're having the fight over cell phones, and we're having, can I stay up later, and can I, all of the boundaries that kids push. We're doing that same thing at our house. And so as a parent, frankly, I think it makes me a much better governor because I'm living the same challenges as most most families in my state in real time. I have a 12-year-old, an almost 11-year-old, and a 9-year-old. And so our kids are right in the thick of their educational journey and experience. And so we're going through those same conversations that other parents are. I think it helps me to do a better job, because I know that every single decision that I make as governor will have a direct impact on my own kids as well as every kid in the state of Arkansas. And so decisions get a lot simpler when you look at it in that lens. And I think it actually helps get rid of some of the distractions and the noise when you can zero down and say, is this better or worse for the kids in my state? And as a mom, I know what that impact really looks like.
Okay, can I get one peek behind the curtain? We're dying to know, because this is a discussion we have with so many guests. The cell phone. Because, as parents of later stage teens, we gave the kids the phones too early. We know that now. Mm-hmm. We regret that we did so. Do you have a viewpoint on age for cell phones personally?
I would be happy if they never had them.
Amen.
But I do think that you have to find a balance. And I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges that we face. And I also think it's one of the biggest problems that we have in our country right now is the access that young people have to smartphones and social media. In fact, one of the big things that we did over the course of the last couple of months is we actually did a volunteer program for school districts to opt in to go phone free, and the state would cover the cost of the pouches or the lockers. 75% of our districts voluntarily opted in.
That's a huge
within
percentage.
the first 6 weeks of opening the program.
Most of the schools.
So most of the schools, and I think that will only continue to grow. We know now a lot of things that we didn't 10 years ago. We know how dangerous and how detrimental it can be to our students by giving them too much access, and certainly too early. And so there has been, I think, a shift which needs to continue, a cultural shift away from so much access for students at an early age. And so big supporter. In fact, I sent out copies of the book, The Anxious Generation, to every single member of the Arkansas legislature, as well as every governor in the country, because I think it is one of the biggest things that we need to be talking about.
Absolutely.
We're seeing the anxiety, suicide, depression rates skyrocket among young people in our country. And we know that the data ties it directly back to the amount of time they're on smartphones and access. And now students are spending an average of about 5 hours a day on social media. That's much. 5 hours they're not studying, they're not talking to their friends, with their family, outside, so many things. And we can see the impact that it's having. So I'm a big believer that as much as we can to move away from the constant addiction and need. I say all that knowing social media can also be a great resource. It's a great way to get information. I use it regularly, but I also think the more that we can limit the amount and the just constant need for it for young people, the better we're going to be.
Time's tight, so final question for you, and that is just, do you think the issue of school choice, education for kids, it really was, as we all know, thrust into the spotlight after COVID? Then universal school choice discussions, like in your state, were driven. Do you think that's ebbing, or will that always be front and center as a statewide conversation and a national conversation for candidates?
I certainly think it will continue to be a major part of the conversation, because now you have parents awakened to the fact that there are options out there. And you have a demand from parents to know more about what and how their kids are being educated. I think COVID really brought to light a lot of things that were taking place in the classroom that parents didn't want their kids exposed to, but they also wanted them to receive a certain level of attention that maybe they weren't getting. So there are a lot of things that I think came from that parents are now paying closer attention to that they haven't been. And so I don't think this conversation is going away, and I'm hopeful that it doesn't, because we need parents to be engaged and active in making decisions and helping find the best pathways forward for their kids.
And your dad, I know, has a series of children's books, so it's still important to your dad, even the former governor of Arkansas.
Well, he's a grandparent of 7, so he's very biased in his, passion for that now with 7 grandkids.
Governor, we are honored to have you stop by the show. Thank you so much for your time.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. We'd love your feedback by rating us and commenting on the show.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Making the Leap.